Well, hello, everyone. I'm Marvin Thomas, Heritage Planning and Policy Advisor with the Heritage Conservation Branch at the Ministry of Parks, Culture and Sport. And welcome to the first day of our 2024 webinars. So it's great to see a lot of people back from past webinars, and we're glad to have many newcomers as well. So we hope you all enjoyed this year's presentations. So before we start, it's important that we acknowledge those with whom we share these lands. In Regina, where I'm located, we're in Treaty 4 territory. This is the traditional land of the Cree and Saulteaux, Nakota, Dakota, Lakota, and home of the Métis. So these webinars are an opportunity to learn about some interesting historic places around the province and the work that people, organizations, and communities are doing to preserve them. But not just preserve them. The historic places we'll hear about are still serving their owners and their communities in a variety of important ways. And as the title of the webinar series implies, historic places are important not only for connecting us with our past, but also for the contributions they continue to make today. There are real social, cultural, economic, even environmental benefits to conserving and continuing to use and engage with these places. And we'll be seeing examples of that throughout the webinar presentations. And today, we'll hear about the work two communities have done to save and reuse older buildings that were no longer needed for their original purpose. And there'll be questions or time for questions of our presenters at the end of the hour. So I'll just ask that you hold your questions until then. And you can also put questions in the chat as we go along. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can. And I'll ask everyone, please keep your cameras and mics turned off during the presentations. So our first presenter will be Heath Duncan. He's the administrator for the village at Vibank, and he's going to tell us about a village building that's entering its second century, but it's still a dynamic part of community life. So Heath, I will turn things over to you.
Thanks, Marvin. I will get this queued up as quick as I can here. Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out today, and thank you, Marvin Thomas, for inviting me to come out today to speak with everyone. My name is Heath Duncan, and I'm the administrator for the village of Vibank. For those of you who don't know, Vibank is a dynamic and growing community, approximately 397 people. We are located approximately 40 minutes southeast of Regina, down Highway 48. Vibank is a tight-knit community with a classic small town feel. The reason I'm here today, and I'm quoting directly from the 2022 official community plan for the village of Vibank. The most significant structure in the village of Vibank was built in 1923. The Holy Family Convent is now a heritage center. The building was considered the gem of the village and housed the Ursuline sisters. As a two-story brick building, it was the largest building in Vibank and perhaps continues to be the most significant building in the community. And the official community plan couldn't be more correct. The heritage building remains a central hub for all of the activities in the village of Vibank. And through the next slides, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history, the current use, and some of the challenges the village faces when trying to maintain a giant 100-year-old building. The building was constructed in 1923 by order of the Roman Catholic Church and was established as Saskatchewan's only Ursuline mother house in Western Canada. The building served as a mother house until 1953, when it was converted to a convent and girls' school. It remained this way until 1977, when the sisters grew to just a small group and the decision was made to sell. The sale was made privately to a businessman who ran the facility as a private school. The owner eventually moved away, and the building changed hands privately once again. The new owner converted it to a disciplinary school, and it ran as a private business. From the time the building was turned over by the Ursuline sisters, it started being taxed as a business in the village. The building began to accrue taxes and moved into arrears, and at one point owed approximately $130,000 in back taxes. The village obtained the services of a lawyer who began to assist them in dealing with the issue. Through that process, it was discovered that the building was never actually legally sold to the previous owners, and that the Ursuline sisters still actually owned the building. The village was able to negotiate a deal with the sisters and church, who passed title to the village at a cost of $1. The village took possession in November of 1992. Once the village took title, there were three options on the table: sell it, bulldoze it, or use it. The council of the day decided to make use of the building. The village as a whole was not supportive of this direction, as they saw it as a drain on resources. In order to protect the building immediately and into the foreseeable future, the village decided to seek heritage designation. The next steps for the village. Once the village took ownership, they immediately became landlords for the tenant left behind. He was given the option to pay the back taxes or leave. He left, and then the village was tasked with cleaning out the building. The village established their office in the building right from day one. The post office followed, and then the first municipally licensed child care center was established in the building. The thought of a child care center came about during discussions of what the village actually needed. The first license was issued for 12 children. We are now sitting with a license for 59, including toddlers and infants. Throughout the years, various businesses have come and gone. In the next slide, you'll see some of the current services offered in our building. The village has always offered leases at a very reasonable rate, with the premise of inexpensive rent, but the cost of improvements to the space being on the tenant. Critical to the growth of businesses and services in the community was the establishment of the Small Business Loans Association program. The program operated on the cooperative model, where businesses could apply and, after going through an approval process, were funded. They became part of the board as a member. The program was a natural fit for the development of the building and to help local businesses grow and expand. A piece of the building that was formerly the chapel has been transformed into the Grotto. Is a cozy restaurant featuring authentic Mexican cuisine on Friday nights and American barbecue on Saturday nights. The Grotto has been featured in several television specials, and the hallway is lined with rave reviews. Dining at the Grotto generally requires months in advance booking and brings busloads of people from miles around into the village. The restaurant serves as one of very few tourist attractions that a village of this size might have to offer. Nestled in the heart of our charming village, our locally owned and operated hair salon is a haven for style seekers. With a warm and inviting atmosphere, our talented stylist blends creativity with personalized service to bring out the unique beauty of each client. Experience the charm of a community-focused salon where expertise meets a friendly touch, making every visit a delightful escape into the artistry of hair care. In the heart of our quaint village lies a treasure trove of knowledge and imagination, the village library, a haven for book lovers. This welcoming space invites patrons to explore its shelves filled with literary wonders. From timeless classics to contemporary tales, the library is a hub for learning and crafting, community gatherings, and quiet contemplation. With a dedicated team passionate about fostering a love for reading, the village library stands as a cultural cornerstone, weaving the threads of stories into the fabric of our tight-knit community. Also at the heart of our village, the post office stands as a pillar of connection and communication. More than a mere hub for parcels and letters, it's a place where the rhythm of daily life is punctuated by the exchange of news, greetings, and small-town warmth. The diligent postal team orchestrates a seamless flow of correspondence, ensuring that the village remains threaded together by the bonds of handwritten letters and thoughtful packages. With its charming facade and reliable service, The village post office is not just a logistical center, but a cherished institution, fostering a sense of continuity in our ever-evolving community. The municipal office stands as our administrative heartbeat, where civic dreams take root and community aspirations come to life. With dedicated public servants at its helm, this unassuming building embodies the essence of local governance. From town planning to vital records, the municipal office is the nerve center, ensuring the smooth orchestration of village affairs. Its doors open to residents seeking guidance, and its corridors echo with the collaborative spirit that shapes our shared destiny. In every transaction and decision, the municipal office is the guardian of our village's growth and prosperity, embodying the collective efforts that make our community thrive. Pioneering progress in childcare, our village proudly introduced the province's first municipally owned daycare. Nestled within a nurturing environment, this innovative center is a testament to our commitment to early childhood development. Meticulously designed with safety and developed in a vibrant tapestry of nature, our municipally owned daycare grounds offer a haven for youthful exploration. Bounded by blossoming gardens and shaded play areas, the landscape is thoughtfully curated to ignite curiosity and foster a love for the outdoors. The grounds echo with the laughter of children engaged in imaginative play, while safety remains paramount with well-maintained equipment and secure boundaries. Amidst the oasis of learning, little ones embark on adventures, forming friendships and creating cherished memories under the watchful care of our dedicated staff. The daycare grounds aren't just a play space, they're a nurturing canvas where each child's potential blooms in harmony with the beauty of the natural surroundings. Upstairs, the convent houses, amongst other things, Vibank dance expressions, the heartbeat of rhythmic artistry in our village. More than a dance studio, it's a dynamic hub where passion takes the lead. With seasoned instructors in a diverse range of classes, from classical forms to contemporary beats, it's a haven for movers of all ages. The studio resonates with the joy of expression, cultivating not just technique, but a community of dance enthusiasts. Vibank Dance Expressions is where the spirit of movement and creativity converge, leaving an indelible mark on our village's cultural landscape. Also housed upstairs in the convent, the Vibank Judo Dojo stands as a bastion of discipline and strength. More than a martial arts center, it's a sanctuary where minds and bodies are honed through the ancient art of judo. Led by skilled instructors, the dojo embodies the principles of respect, perseverance, and self-control. Here, participants of all ages learn not just physical techniques, but life skills that transcend the mat. The Vibank Judo Dojo is a place where the echoes of throws and holds are accompanied by the subtle growth of character, forging resilient individuals within the fabric of our community. With ink-stained history and a legacy of storytelling, the Forum newspaper has recently changed hands, marking a new chapter in our community's media landscape. As it embarks on a fresh journey, the paper continues its commitment to delivering timely news, insightful stories, and a reflection of our village's heartbeat. Under new ownership, the Forum aims to preserve its journalistic integrity while embracing the evolving dynamics of modern communication. The ink may change, but the dedication to informing and connecting our community remains steadfast, ensuring that the spirit of the Forum lives on in every printed page and digital update. Current challenges. The facility is over 100 years old. With a building of this size and this age, the reality is it is becoming more and more difficult to maintain. The materials used to construct the building, in a lot of cases, aren't available anymore, or don't comply with code. Some of this is cosmetic, things like doors, ceiling tiles, or flooring. But when maintaining the history of the building is a priority, it creates difficulty. Finding laborers or companies willing to do the work we need is another challenge. It is becoming increasingly difficult to find skilled workers who are willing to work on the building or infrastructure within the building. For example, the heating system we have is a boiler system. Replacement parts such as rads and fittings are becoming next to impossible to find. And more we are hearing that they don't want to risk working on a system where the piping is as old as it is. Finding companies willing to do restoration on the masonry work of the building is also becoming more difficult and costly. There is also the issue of code. As soon as we need to change something, we are always looking at the possibility of losing our grandfathered status. Like we can leave as is and maintain, but any changes, and we are looking at potentially a complete overhaul. Not necessarily a negative thing, but essentially for a small village, cost prohibitive. Accessibility is also becoming more of a concern. The reality is these facilities were never built with this in mind. Finding a balance between keeping rents affordable for tenants as a community-owned use facility and balancing maintenance costs is also always a challenge. Maintaining and restoration of the heritage aspects of the building, stonework, masonry, woodwork, all of this requires a specialized touch, which is becoming increasingly difficult to find. All things considered, the facility is the core of our community, and I honestly couldn't tell you how we would function without it. The challenges have been many, and they won't be slowing down anytime soon. But we've heard feedback from other communities who had opportunities such as this and instead chose to demolish the building. Almost every one of them, if they could go back, would choose to preserve the building and make use of it in a similar capacity that we have. You're going to always go that way down the road, but once it's gone, and all that's left is to wonder, what if?
So thank you, Heath. Apologies for the technical glitch there. Thank you for carrying on right through it. And so the Heritage Branch often points to Vibank's convent as an example of what even a smaller community can do to preserve its built heritage. And watching your presentation, I thought it really brought home to me how many different aspects of community life the building touches upon and supports. So your council and the whole Vibank community certainly deserves a lot of credit for ensuring that this iconic building lives on.
Thank you.
So Heath is going to stay until the end of the hour. So if anyone has any questions for him, please hold them until after the next presentation, or put them in the chat. And our next presenter is going to be Royce Pettyjohn, a member of the board of Southwestern Saskatchewan Oldtimers Museum, and someone some of you know in his other capacities. So I think it's fair to say that when the building Royce is going to talk about was at the end of its first life, it could have easily been seen as just an eyesore, but the Oldtimers Museum saw an opportunity. And Royce, we're looking forward to learning how an abandoned garage came to be a valued community amenity. And I'll give you the floor.
All right, well, thank you very much, Marvin. I will get my presentation started here. All right, so I'm assuming that you can see that all right?
You're good.
All right, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Royce Pettyjohn. I'm a volunteer with the Southwest Sask Oldtimers Museum in Maple Creek, and I'm going to be talking to you about the adaptive reuse of the CM Glascock building, which is an old garage building in the Maple Creek Heritage District in the downtown core, which is also a designated municipal heritage property. Okay, so the building has evolved over time. It actually was built in 3 major construction phases. The oldest part of the building and the original part of the building is the Patterson's garage that you can see here. It was built in 1909, and interestingly enough, that was only 1 year after the first Model T Ford rolled off the assembly line. We had a garage in Maple Creek that was serving Ford vehicles. Then in 1916, Patterson's expanded the building to the east. You can see the original 1909 structure with the two-story 1916 structure on the left. And that expanded the size and space of the building considerably. In 1926, it was bought out by Blythemans, became Blythemans Garage, and at that time it also became a Chevrolet garage. You can see the sign above the garage door in the 1909 section of the building there says Chevrolet Garage. So it was Ford Garage from 1909 to 1926, and then from 1926 for the remainder of its life as a garage, it served as a Chevrolet dealership. Then in 1930, there was yet another addition made to the east again. On the right, you can see the 1916 section that we talked about earlier, and on the left, the 1930 section. And on the corner, you can see there was a large canopy, a large section of the building that overhung the gas pumps on the corner of the building. And we call this the Art Moderne Inspired Edition, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the canopy over the gas pumps didn't last very long. It wasn't long before they were removed. I suspect there was difficulty getting vehicles in and out, and perhaps it was a bit low. So when the canopy was removed, it created a very distinctive angled corner for the building. And then the building was also stuccoed, and it was given these racing stripe colors, which was common at the time. And by 1950, it had changed hands again. It became Maple Creek Motors, or Glascock's Garage. And then you can see the building here as it looked around the turn of the millennium as a Chevrolet dealership, Maple Creek Motors. Now, when I talked about Art Moderne, it's the building at that point tried to emulate what was common in architecture in the mid-20th century for buildings related to the automotive industry, like bus depots and garages and gas stations and automobile dealerships. And this is a photograph of a building in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And you can see the inspiration for the Glascock building here. You know, the white, smooth stucco walls are supposed to represent aerodynamics. Usually these buildings had rounded corners and these racing stripes, which made them look like they were in motion. And again, it was in honor of its connection to the automobile dealership and automobile world. So that's what they were going for with this addition to the Glascock building. But of course, it wasn't a pure example of it because, of course, there's three other buildings all meshed together, which give it a very unique and unusual appearance from the street. The building operated for exactly 100 years as a garage and automobile dealership, 1909 to 2009. It was believed that it was the oldest continually operated dealership building in its original building in Saskatchewan, possibly even in Western Canada. And after 100 years, it closed down. And in 2010, Mr. C.M. Glascock, the gentleman in the middle there in the black, he turned the keys over to the Southwest Sask Oldtimers Museum. There's Wynne Thompson, the honorary president, accepting the keys. Now, the reason the museum was interested in the building was because they were undertaking a major rehabilitation of the main museum building, which was immediately next door to the Glascock building. And this rehabilitation would take several years, and it also necessitated the museum moving out of their main museum building. So they needed a place to go. They needed a place to store their collection and also serve as a base of operations. So the Glascock building recently being vacant next door seemed like the most likely candidate. They acquired the building, moved everything out of the log museum, and took ownership of the garage. Now, the garage acquisition on the part of the museum was not without controversy. It was a massive building. It is a massive building, the largest commercial building in the downtown core. It also had structural issues given its age. And of course, it was very dingy as a result of 100 years of being used as a garage. It was dirty and it was grimy and it was greasy. And some people felt that that was not the most appropriate space for the museum to be taking on for a whole host of reasons. Now, because the building was so big, the museum realized they could only approach it in small steps. So the first step was to address the Northwest Service Bay in this photograph here. And the idea was that it was the area that was going to serve as the temporary exhibit hall for the museum. All the permanent exhibits would be moved from next door into the Northwest Service Bay. So the first thing that needed to be done is everything had to be pressure washed, the ceilings, the floor, the walls, get all the grease and grime and dirt off of the structure. Then broken concrete needed to be patched on the floor, making it even. Then the floors and the ceilings and the walls were all sealed and painted. And it was remarkable, the transformation of the space from that dirty old garage into a fairly clean looking, bright open space. In July of 2011, just a little over a year from when the keys were turned over, elders from Niconete First Nation came in and did a smudge inside of the space to prepare it for its opening. And just before the ribbon was cut opening the Northwest Service Bay, Niconete also led a drumming, dancing, and singing demonstration outside of the building. Immediately after the demonstration, Clarence Glascock, CM Glascock, and our honorary president at the time, Isabel Gordon, cut the ribbon, inviting people into the Northwest Service Bay. So you'll remember this is what the Northwest Service Bay looked like before, and you'll notice that door in the background there where the windows have been painted directly behind the lift. Well, that same door you can see at the end of this photograph here. So that was when the building opened and all of the permanent exhibits from the museum next door had been moved in. So for the period of time, the next door museum was under reconstruction. The Glascock building served as the temporary exhibit hall and storage space for the museum's collection in its entirety. Now, that day of the opening of the Northwest Service Bay, we partnered with Niconete also to do Bannock burgers. And the showroom of the building, the Glascock building, was used as the location where we served the Bannock burgers. And some people milled around inside and ate their Bannock burgers. Some were outside. And it made us realize that the building had more potential than just as a storage space for artifacts or as a temporary home for the museum. Its size and its location in the downtown core represented an opportunity for a community space in the downtown core. And that was something that we hadn't seen in the downtown since the turn of the last century. At that time, community halls used to be on the second floor of some of the buildings in the downtown core, but they had certainly been closed down and moved out of the downtown for quite some time. So the idea was we would use this showroom as a community space. So of course it needed to be rehabilitated. And so the first thing that we did was try to get rid of all of the modern updates that were done to the space. The first thing we did was get rid of the T-bar drop ceiling, restoring the space to its original height. And then when we took the T-bar ceiling down, we discovered that the ceiling above it was actually sagging. It was in the process of starting to collapse as a result of age and weight. So we ended up having to install a series of engineered arches and beams to shore up the structure of the ceiling of the showroom in order to make it structurally sound once again. And then rather than just gyp rocking over top of the ceiling, we repaired the original lath and plaster ceiling, replaced any missing sections, fixed the cracks, and then just scrubbed and cleaned. This is a ceiling in the showroom that looks like it's been painted gray, but actually it's just years and years of dirt and grime on it from all of the years of it being operated as a garage. So slowly, as we were able to strip back and clean off all of the grunge from the walls and ceilings, we were able to start the process of painting and sealing the showroom. So remember, this is what the showroom in the parts department area looked like when we inherited the building in 2011 or 2010. And this is what it looked like after the rehabilitation. So a very marked change in its appearance from before and after. This is the parts department area before. This is the parts department area after. This is that high area where I was scrubbing the ceiling in the earlier photos, getting the grime off the ceiling. This is it before, and this is it after. And this is a little area at the front where there were a couple of offices. We removed those offices, and this is what it looked like afterwards. Removing the offices revealed an original 1930 interior wall, which was not only an interesting insight into how the interior of the space probably looked like in the 1930s, but it also revealed the original color scheme for the interior of the building. And we used that same garage gray, that we called it, on the trim and accents throughout the rest of the showroom in the building. And up in the attic, we found some letterings that spelt out Blythman's Garage. So as a tribute to the building's 1920s and 1930s heritage, those letters were installed on that feature wall. One of the sales offices was turned into a small servery, not a kitchen, just a small servery, so we could have a place to serve coffee and cookies when the building was being used for events. Upgraded the heating system, introduced insulation into the attic, which had never been there before, and then tried to hide the modern utilities behind period grates and so on and so forth. So this is the picture of the showroom in progress, and here it is set up for an event afterwards. So our objective, again, was to turn it into a community events venue. And I think we were quite successful in that transformation. We would host events in there every year, including the Maple Creek Community Awards Gala, which was a gathering to celebrate the Citizen of the Year, the Business of the Year, and present awards to worthy volunteers within the community. Cowtown Christmas was our big Christmas event, and the showroom always is used as a warm-up station for people waiting to get on hay rides. There's usually children's Christmas crafts you can see in the bottom left. And then in the background, you can see the Chamber of Commerce handing out hot dogs to people, encouraging them to shop and be in the downtown core. Our street festivals, the Glascock building plays a critical role in our street festivals. There's always a pancake breakfast there during the Heritage Festival. There's various workshops and exhibits and performances that take place during the festivals. Over the years, we've also had musical performances as special events within the building itself. It's been a host to a variety of community teas, as well as private birthday parties and private rentals. The museum has used it as our art gallery. We've used it to host temporary exhibits of local art and artists in the museum. Even during the Taste of Maple Creek for many years, we operated an event called Art in the Tent. We augmented the space inside with tents on the outside of the building on the pad where the gas tanks and gas pumps used to be. And that way people could flow in off of the street into the tents, into the showroom, back out into the tents, and so on and so forth. The museum has used the showroom for guest speakers, as well as our own public lecture series that we offer each year at the museum. It's been a wonderful space for that. The museum also uses it for temporary exhibitions. Where the Northwest Service Bay was the permanent exhibits, the showroom provides a space where temporary exhibitions can be mounted. And we've hosted traveling exhibits in the showroom as well, like the Akin to the Land exhibit that was being toured around by the Swift Current Museum. Up until that point, we really had no place in the community where we could host traveling exhibits coming in from outside the community. And one of my favorite annual events at the garage is garage sale at the garage. We thought if we had a garage, why not have a garage sale as a fundraiser? And people would donate things to the garage sale. We'd have 2 days of sales, and all of the proceeds would go back to the museum and to the Glascock building itself. It's been invaluable for school groups. The old museum really didn't have a lot of space to accommodate school groups in any large numbers, but the showroom solved that problem, and we were able to accommodate large groups of children coming in for tours of the museum and educational programming. One of the things that we were able to do as a result of having the showroom is we did the Living Heritage Art Workshop series, which was funded by the Saskatchewan Arts Board. And the idea was that the public and students would come into the museum, and local artists and the museum would co-host presentations and exhibits about the history and culture of the community. And then the artists, often supported by elders from within the community, would showcase art activities or traditional art activities. And the students and the public would learn about the history and culture of the community and some of the representative art forms of the community's past. And elders would come in from the ranching community, the Métis community, and the local First Nation Nicanite as well. For our efforts on this program, we received the Lieutenant Governor's Heritage Conservation Award for community outreach, which is something that we never could have achieved had we not had the space to be able to explore some of these new ways of doing business. The Glascock building was also invaluable as the headquarters for the Main Street Saskatchewan program when Maple Creek was implementing that in the 2012 to about 2018 period. And there's a wonderful picture of the mayor cutting a cake in the shape of the Glascock building. The Main Street program was a heritage-led community and economic development project, which was tremendously successful in Maple Creek and resulted in the town receiving the Prince of Wales Prize for Municipal Heritage Leadership. And again, we owe a lot of that to the fact that we had the Glascock building available to support us in that initiative. And as the song goes, they shot a movie once in my hometown. Everyone was in it from miles around. They filmed a movie recently here in Maple Creek. And as a result of that, they needed extras for the movie. So volunteers from the community were asked to come to the Glascock building and sign up to be extras and background players in the movie. And in this photo, you can see not only is the showroom filled with people signing their release forms and volunteering as extras, they spilled out onto the street and around the corner. So part of the success of this building has not just been the museum trying to operate it itself. It has been working with other groups in the community as partners and as tenants and as regular users of the space. And had we not had that community involvement, it wouldn't have been successful and the museum wouldn't have been able to do it on their own. Communities in Bloom was a big part of the operations of the building. They based themselves out of the building, stored equipment there. They would have their annual Earth Week spring cleanup pizza party for people that were involved in the spring cleanup of the community. Their soiree that they would have annually often would take place in the showroom. And on the theme of what can you achieve for your community as a result of having such a space, well, the Communities in Bloom also led us to a national Communities in Bloom competition win while they were a tenant in the Glascock building. Our Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee was based in the Glascock building and had their meetings there. Chamber of Commerce based in the Glascock building and had their meetings and events there. The Cypress Hills Métis Cultural and Resource Center had offices in the building and would do presentations and programs and workshops in the building. As I said, artists would use it as an exhibition space, but Jeff Phillips also used it as a studio. This photo shows him painting one of his big commissions, the Maple Creek Heritage District Gateway mural, a very large mural that he painted inside and then moved out into the community once it was completed. And then, of course, the car club has been involved with the building. And what better way to use an old garage than as an old garage? And so it's not uncommon to see members of the car club working on vehicles in the back of the building. Now, a lot of what I've talked about has been the 1930 section of the building primarily. The 1916 section and the 1909 section of the building are still works in progress. They still have work that needs to be done. And when we inherited the building, the 1916 section was leaking rather badly. And that was due to the fact that it had a flat roof section that supported 3 large skylights. And over the years, the roof had been patched and patched and patched till it was mostly just tar and patch and not so much roof anymore. In the attic of the building, you can see the skylights illuminating the space. And upstairs, one day we discovered that there was debris laying all over the floor and we couldn't figure out where it came from until we looked up and realized that the debris had fallen out of the ceiling, that the ceiling was collapsing. And the only thing between inside and outside was a layer of tar and patch. So we ripped off the entire roof, redecked it, and put on new torched roofing, which solved the leaking problem and was also allowed us to conserve the large skylights, which are character-defining elements of the building. The Patterson garage at the back was also leaking. Water was running off the edge of the building, down the wall, and getting into the wall. So rather than allowing that to continue, we ended up putting eaves troughs all around the building to collect water and distribute it away from the building. And then inside the Patterson garage, started ripping out the walls, doing structural repairs. And the idea is that when that work is complete, it'll become the home for Maple Creek's oldest continually operated fire truck that dates from 1941. Now, this northwest service bay started leaking as well, not inside, but inside the wall. And we get these dark, wet patches. And what would happen is the water would get into the wall and it would freeze the terracotta and they would explode. And as a result, the wall was becoming structurally compromised. And up on the roof, there was this mysterious low area that didn't look like it was leaking and we couldn't really see any evidence of leaking inside. But when we opened up the ceiling, discovered that a number of the roof rafters were broken. And there was indeed a leak, and it was leaking into the wall, freezing and shattering the terracotta. So that whole area had to be opened up, had to be structurally reinforced inside and out, new timber, new masonry, new brickwork, and then it all had to be restuccoed and repainted. And the end result was pretty convincing. It looked pretty good when it was done. We also completely redid the membrane on that section of the building for the roof to ensure that water would drain off of the roof properly. And on the inside, as a result of concern about the condition of the wall after it had been compromised by the freezing and thawing, we put pilings in and built engineered arches to support the weight of the roof. So it wasn't fully on the wall itself. And then the walls were all repaired and restuccoed and repainted. And the ceiling was completely redone as well with this metal sheeting, which may not seem heritage, but when we did remove the drop ceiling in the showroom, we did discover some of it in sections of the ceiling in the showroom. So now the two match. Then the windows. Their windows weren't original, but they started rotting out of the frame. They were ready to fall out onto the street. So we ended up replacing windows as our most recent project. And you can see the contractor there. And when we took this picture of him, he said, "I'm not going to lie, this was the rankest window job I've ever done." And I had to laugh because that was the same thing that the roofers said. They said that was easily the worst roofing job they ever had. And the guy that did the structural repairs in the showroom, he said, looking back at pictures, he said, "It makes me want to throw up. That was the worst job I ever had." So it hasn't been an easy job rehabilitating this building, but it has been worthwhile. One of the cool things with the window project is we were able to redo the carpentry inside. So all of the windows now have reproductions of the original 1930s trim work that would have been throughout the inside of the building. It just needs now to be given its garage gray paint job. Now, a lot of the funding for this project was raised by the museum itself and through the support of our partners and tenants and users, but a lot of it also came from the Saskatchewan Heritage Foundation. And we can't thank them enough for their financial support as well as their guidance throughout the project. So what's the future? Well, the future is, we got to repaint the interior. It's 12 years now, and that's got to be redone. The exterior, as you've seen in some of the photos, needs to be repainted as well. And then there's a laundry list of other things that still need to be done. The Patterson garage, the entire east side of the roof, a new heating system for the 1916 section. There's going to be a new conservation lab for the museum constructed, and then in the Northwest Service Bay, which is now vacant because the exhibits that were in there have moved back to the dedicated museum building. We want to repurpose that as a space for exhibits of larger oversized artifacts. So it's never ending. And I think, when we think of this project, if we had considered everything that needed to be done at the time that we took it on, it might have been overwhelming and we might not have done it. And of course, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And the Glascock building is the largest building in the downtown core, is definitely an elephant. And like I said, had we gone into it knowing, we probably wouldn't have done it. But I'm so glad that we did, because at the end of the day, the building has paid for itself in its service to the community over and over again. And what's our greatest threat? Well, our greatest threat, yikes. Our greatest threat is post-pandemic amnesia. And what I mean by that is leading up to the pandemic, the building was heavily used. There was pretty much something going on in there every single week. But after the pandemic, we saw less and less regular use of the building by fewer organizations. And I think part of it was we got out of the practice of using the building. We got out of the practice of doing the things that we were typically doing in that building. And after the pandemic, the community really changed in how it approached social activity. And as a result, I don't think we've ever really gotten back to where we were before the pandemic. So that's a bit concerning. Like the late Queen used to say, "I need to be seen to be believed." Well, it's the same with heritage buildings. They need to be used in order to be preserved. A building that doesn't have a meaningful role in the community is so much more difficult to save and to continue to preserve into the future. So I often say with heritage buildings, use it or lose it. If you're not using it, it's not going to survive. So the post-pandemic world, I think, where the museum needs to focus attention is regaining that focal point of community life once again. make it once again a no-brainer that it's got to be at the Glascock building, or the Glascock building's got to be used, or it's got to be involved, and have more groups coming back in and making use of the facility going forward. So I'll leave you with this image of the showroom set up for a community event. And if nothing else, the one message that I hope everyone takes away is that if a dirty old garage can be saved, so can any heritage building and whatever its state across the province. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Royce. Boy, what a transformation, and what a great multi-purpose facility for Maple Creek. Just like the Vibank convent, it's such a good example of how historic buildings can keep contributing to community life rather than being demolished and sent to the municipal landfill. Heath, I appreciated your comment that once a building's demolished, you've cut off all your future options for any possible future use. So that's a decision that really has to be considered carefully, obviously, if any community is facing a similar situation. So we do have some time for questions before the end of the hour here. So if you have anything you'd like to ask Heath or Royce, please just raise your hand using the hand icon on your screen and I'll call on you. Or you can also put questions in the chat if you would like. And we'll just take a few minutes here to see if anyone has any comments or questions. Krista, if you turn your mic on, I see you have a question there.
Yeah, this is a general question on both of your properties are, different use by different community members or community businesses. How do you go about engaging the community? And also, I know it is a challenge post-pandemic, but how do you go about that? Is there, attending economic development meetings or just actually reaching out, like the volunteers or staff reaching out to businesses or those communities, and how does that engagement work just for both of you?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, for us, it occurred organically, and when I was on the board of the museum, one of the things that we created was a outreach and communication committee. And the outreach and communication committee was basically to do just that, liaison with other community groups and other organizations within the community. And the idea was to make them aware of what we were doing and then also ensure that they felt welcome to be part of that and inviting them to be at the building and use the building and so on and so forth. So for us, it sort of happened organically. And there was a lot of groups that were also sort of homeless. They were sort of just meeting at the local restaurant or something like that. So there was a big need for meeting space, if nothing else, in the community. And so we were able to satisfy that just by letting them know, hey, come and use the building and join us in our journey. So that's sort of how we approached it. It was more organic, more community level, more communications, and just liaising and partnering.
Yeah, for us too, all of the community groups and businesses in the building have been here for over 5 years. There's still some space, small office space upstairs that people are always coming and going from, but people always come to me if they're looking to use the building for one thing or another.
Great, thank you.
Bruce, did I see your hand go up and maybe down again?
There's a question in the chat, Marvin. I see he posted it there.
Oh, good. Okay, Bruce put his question in the chat. A question for Heath. You mentioned at the beginning you had a fair amount of community resistance to taking on the building. So what's the level of support for the building now? And were there any particular things that were done that helped change people's minds?
I wasn't here when that resistance happened, when they took over the building. But people are always resistant to change, and and generally resistant to spending money on something that they see as wasteful. Just the use, the continued use of the building, it's become a real community hub. It holds the post office, the restaurant, the village office, the hairdressers, the library, the daycare. The daycare was a big turning point too for the village because it was a service that everybody needed, and now it has a space that it can exist, and it's only grown over the years. So I think the success of the project is what changed the resistance.
It would be the same for us. Like I said, when we took it over, it was very controversial because it was a dirty old garage. There was concerns that it might be a contaminated site, you know, and what was the museum getting itself into? And even some of the board members at the time, when the decision was made to acquire the building, they quit. You know, they didn't want to have any part of it. And some of them that were not really on board, by the time the first two phases of the rehabilitation was complete, they said they never would have, they can't imagine what operations would be like now without that building. It's become so integrated into the museum's world that they can't imagine what it would be like not having it. So it's, as my colleague pointed out, I think a lot of people are resistant to change, but when they actually experience the benefit, then that changes mindset. And then the question in the chat, do community groups pay for space? At the Glascock building, it was a combination of rentals, either long-term or short-term, partnerships, which would see sort of co-funding of certain aspects. And then there was also opportunities for people to be there in kind, with the expectation that when they were getting funding or grants, that some of that money would be used to support the facility or provide furnishings and things like that. So there was a whole range of different economic models for how we dealt with users within the space.
Yeah, and Heath, did you want to address that as well?
Which, is there a new question?
How the users of the building pay for the space, or whether they do, or
Oh, yeah, they all have lease agreements, and they pay monthly. And they've been for years now, mostly.
yeah, and I think you did mention in your presentation their lease rates are quite low, but they will make some capital investments into the space as the tenants.
Right.
Caught
They've
that right?
all, they've all improved the appearance of their spaces, but their rent is low, right? It's to encourage businesses to exist in the community that wouldn't exist here otherwise.
And we'd get some groups that would come in to rent the space for meetings, and we would charge them like $25 or something like that. But then when we'd come in to do the cleaning after the meeting was over, there'd be a check for $100 or $200 or $500 sitting on the check as a donation.
That's great, and that and it points to the more general point that Royce emphasized: is a historic building really does have to have a viable use to hope to survive. And the model of, and it's sometimes hard, especially for a larger building like the convent or even the size of the Glascock building, to find a single user for a building like that can be difficult, if not impossible. So this sort of multi-use model can often be a successful approach to readapting a historic building. And not seeing any other questions come in. We got a couple, 3 minutes here. If anybody's thinking of anything last minute, just put up your hand or put it in the chat. Just while we're giving people a minute, we'll note too that Heath, you put your finger on some of the common challenges of readapting an historic building in terms of availability of materials and skilled tradespeople, code compliance, accessibility, and so forth. So it's certainly a challenge that a lot of owners of historic buildings and the heritage sector itself is grappling with and trying to focus on finding ways to deal with those kinds of challenges. So it is something ongoing and certainly has a level of awareness in the heritage community. So it's glad you happened to point that out in terms of what you're experiencing there in Vibank. And there's always capital needs, of course, for any of these buildings. Well, I'm not seeing any last questions, I don't believe. So that does bring us pretty much to the end of the hour. So a huge thank you to Heath and Royce. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you volunteering your time to come and be with us to tell us about these great projects. And thank you to everyone who attended. Some of you will be back on Thursday for a presentation on the Saskatchewan Indigenous Cultural Center's work to bring home Buffalo Child Stone. And then next Thursday, we'll hear how 2 developers found value in rehabilitating historic buildings for commercial use and what it took to make their projects happen. So there are late registrations available. If you'd like to attend, send an email or give us a call. I've put that contact information in the chat there. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Marvin.